Usher and Tony Gerstenberger presenting about AEP charge and innovation.
Thanks. I don't need that. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here and learning about our path on how we, like Derek insinuated, is how we're trying to change the way we do business to support our customers and the people that are in our communities. So tonight's talk is Reinventing a Culture of Innovation. You're going to hear in the presentation that there's a history of innovation at AEP. We need to reinvent that to be current and contemporary for our customers to meet their expectations. What we think about tonight's conversation and presentation is that a lot of what we're doing can apply to you, and it can apply to what you can do in your businesses and your work experiences to rely on things that you've done and experiences that you've had to think about doing things differently to stay relevant and listen and react to your customers' expectations. So, quick intro. We're going to go through, tell you a little bit about myself. Matt's going to tell you a little bit about him. Interesting backgrounds, I think you'll probably agree. But we don't have a technology background per se. But you'll hear a little bit about why we're passionate about technology and why we are invested and we're passionate about what we're trying to do here at AEP. We're going to talk about leveraging the past. I mentioned AEP. Derek mentioned there's a 106-year history of AEP doing things and doing things differently to stay current and stay competitive in the energy industry. We're going to share a little bit about that and why that's important. But we can't do that without a culture within the organization and the communities that we serve to support that. So why is culture important and how we're going through a cultural transformation? We're going to talk a little bit about that. But as I think we can all relate to, if we're trying to start up a company, if we're a big AEP giant, we're always challenged to stay in tune with our customers. And that's an important fact that we'll talk about here as well. And then lastly, charge is different. This organization is different. Things that you do are different. And we always need to make sure that we're trying to measure and account for how much progress we are or aren't making to make sure that we accommodate the expectations of the customers around us. So some of the key takeaways, I'm just going to say these words and think about these as we're talking about some of the experiences and some of the things that we're trying to do here at Charge and at AEP. You know, we've got a past, there's culture, there's listening, and there's the community. So just think about that. You might see some reference to that in the slides. That's what's really making it important to us and providing the context for how we anticipate making this transformation possible. So who are we? I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Matt's going to get up here and tell you about why we're passionate about technology. This is me. My wife and I on the left. We love to play around. We love to travel. We're really passionate about learning and seeing new things. So we take every opportunity we can to travel, and one of the things that we do is we try to take ski vacations and trips to expose that opportunity and that experience to our kids. I learned how to ski very early on. I was probably 5 years old. I don't even remember if I was 5 or 4 or whatever, but I was committed when I had kids to say I'm going to get them skiing as early as possible because that's a passion of mine. So I'm proud to say that my 2 kids that are now 13 and 14, they were skiing before they turned 2. So they're very well versed in it, and we really enjoy that as a family. How does this relate to technology? You know, for most of us in this room, we might have on Christmas morning opened a box of Legos, like my son did in this picture, and been over the moon with having the opportunity to be creative and learn how to build something and see a creation start from just blocks. What that's evolved into is the other pictures that you see. I'm really passionate about these 2 pictures because it's how technology is evolving. And these are 2 pictures of my kids that are participating in a robotics program that I'm the coach of. So it's an example of, I'm like emotional about this, and I didn't think that I would be. These guys have such opportunity that they don't even know is different for them the way that it is now for how I experienced my childhood. Technology and innovation is all around these kids. I mean, we all have a computer in our pocket. It's part of who we are. It's part of how we get our jobs done. It's part of how we do our daily lives. And the things like this, progressing from just a simple Lego kit to having the opportunity to participate in these these robotics programs where they're learning coding, they're learning autonomous robot programming, and they're learning to work with teams to build and create and do things to meet an objective. They're learning very early on how they can use technology to make their lives different and improve the way that they work with their peers and their friends around them. So that's really a key point of who I am, is commitment to the future of how technology and innovation can help them thrive in their lives. And that's just something that I wanted to really emphasize on this slide. A little bit about me at AEP. I'm a mechanical engineer. I've been at AEP for 17 years. I started in the generation organization where, as part of an organization of mechanical engineers. And a lot of what you might hear about, there's a little common theme about AEP generating assets and environmental pollution control equipment. This is an example of how technology has changed the way AEP's done systems. Some of these power plants that we have in operation have been in operation for 50, 60, 70 years, and we're continuing to try to maintain them. When all these environmental requirements to clean up the flue gas that's coming out of these coal-fired power plants came along, we had to implement technology and innovative solutions to make that happen. This is a picture of a fan. You might have gathered that, but we need to convey the flue gas out of the coal-fired power plant after we install all of this new equipment. And this is an example of innovation. This is an overseas European technology company that has been using it in Europe for several years, and we adopted it in the United States. And from about 2005 to 2013, this was my life. I was the AEP fan man. So everybody knew if there was a fan-related question, they would contact me, and as an engineer, I would help them understand their application and potentially troubleshooting after they were installed. So I'm going to kind of go back to a real quick story. My son, who is now 14, about 6 years ago, he came home from a friend's house. I live out in the country, Plain City area. He came home after a sleepover at his house. His dad manages 2,000 to 3,000 acres of farmland. He came home. I said, "Did you have a good night? What'd you do?" He said, I was up all night. My immediate thought was, "You're playing video games, right?" And he's like, "No, we were out in the farm field." I said, "What in the world are you doing out in the farm field?" They have a combine that has autonomous driving capability. So my son, who was, I was a little concerned when I heard this. My son, who was 9 years old at the time, and his friend, who was 9 years old at the time, were by themselves in a $250,000 combine, running it back and forth in this farm field. This is what technology's doing today. And you've got kids, probably not the best idea, but you've got kids that can do it, right? I mean, they were just pushing a button, going down a row. At the end of the row, they were actually turning it around manually, pushing a button, going down a row. And he stayed up all night doing it. This is where we're going. And AEP needs to make sure that we can accommodate the future, because things like this might happen to us. So I mentioned a little bit about my fan experience. This is where it really all started. This is the Gavin Power Plant down in Cheshire, Ohio, down near Athens, Gallipolis area, if any of you are familiar with that area. There we go. Yeah, I lived there for a few years. Yeah? All right. I did too. That's amazing. Hocking Valley Bank. So yeah, I worked at Gavin, started there, really started to understand how... Philip Sporn. Yes, Philip Sporn is legacy at AEP. I really learned how the business works there. I really got to use my mechanical engineering experience and understand how the power plant works, be involved in some technology development to clean up the flue gas. We were committed to cleaning up the flue gas. This was the early 2000s and even prior to. I got a lot of experience and learned a lot about how AEP works and got to try to use my mechanical engineering experience and education to better the company. The one thing that, and this is where Matt and I kind of have a connection and where we really kind of first met, was that most of you might not know, and he won't tell you, but he's a World Rallycross car driver. And he showed up at the power plant in a race car, flying around the corner as a world, just kidding. I'm just kidding, it's a joke. But no, in reality, I saw this blue Subaru Impreza in the parking lot one day, and I'm a car guy. In the sea of pickup trucks, I saw a blue Subaru, and I'm like, that guy, I need to meet that guy. And so that's how we kind of had the connection, and for 17 years, we've been somehow working together. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt now, let him tell you a little bit about himself.
All right, thanks, Tony. It's funny that Tony mentioned that he was drawn to me by my vehicle because for years I pull up in the AEP garage and I see these awesome cars, and I'm like, who owns that? And it ends up it's Tony. So I have since graduated from my WRX. I now drive a very sensible Honda Accord, but the gas mileage is good, so that's good. But no, this is me. This is my family, my wife, my two kids. I have a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old. And like Tony, I am an avid, I'm into technology. I love technology. I'm an enthusiast of technology. But at the same time, I have an appreciation for the technologies that have staying power and an appreciation for the past. So that's my house up in Clintonville. It turns 103 years old this year. My wife and I have painstakingly put a lot of effort into it to keep it preserved and in that condition, and we're very proud of it. I take that into my hobbies as well, and I like to look at technologies that, again, have that sustainability and that staying power. If you think about it, one of the oldest technologies in the world, really, is the fermentation of grain into alcohol. And you think about how cities were formed, and cities like Columbus that sprouted up along a riverbed. For many years, they couldn't drink the water because it was unclean. So they were actually brewing beer and staying hydrated with beer until water purification came around. So it's an example of how technology that stayed with us for many, many years. I was born and raised in Kentucky, so rite of passage is when you're born and raised in Kentucky, you probably got a little bourbon in your blood. So I'm also a big fan and a collector of bourbon. And another technology that's been with us for a century or more is just the art that Mr. Edison developed of transforming audio to media. And I'm a huge collector of vinyl records. I have about 600 in my collection. The mailman, my wife was home one day and she was getting the mail, and the mailman came and he dropped a record off of my house and he said, "Is your husband a DJ?" Because he's continually delivering records to my house. So. But it's been a great hobby, and I've got a 5-year-old, and I am very proud of the fact that my 5-year-old does not know what a compact disc is, but she does know what a vinyl record is, and she asked Santa Claus this past Christmas for a record player for her bedroom, and I was a real proud dad at that point. So back to how Tony and I met. This picture describes it pretty much in a nutshell, and I'm going to give a little background on it and set it up, but I was an engineer with AEP. I'd been with the company about 5 years, and we had just installed a piece of equipment at the Gavin power plant where Tony worked called an SCR, a selective catalytic reduction system. And what that does is it's like the catalytic converter in your car. It takes NOx out of the exhaust gas of the power plant, much like catalytic converter takes NOx out of the exhaust gas of your vehicle. So it reduces smog in essence. And so when we installed the SCR at Gavin, we solved one problem, but we created another. Because as the exhaust gases were going across, the sulfur dioxide that is in that exhaust gas, which is later collected downstream in a scrubber, a portion of that sulfur dioxide was oxidizing, and we were getting another pollutant that we didn't want. So we went from having a cloud of smog exiting the plant to having this nasty blue haze. We were getting calls. AEP was getting calls from the community. What is this blue haze I'm seeing coming out of the stack at Gavin plant? It's normally nice, pristine white steam that's coming out of there, and now you're telling me, it's blue. And we said, we gotta fix the problem. So, sorry, Kevin. So in order to solve that issue, I was put on a team of engineers, and we determined that if we could lower the temperature entering the SCR, it would solve the problem. It would prevent that chemical reaction from happening and prevent that blue haze from occurring. So I said, great, we can do this. We designed a water injection system to inject water upstream in a fine mist that would rapidly evaporate, lower the temperature, and we should be good. So we installed the water injection system, we turned it on, we lowered the temperature, we looked at the stack, the blue haze went away, we looked at our data, the SO3 that we were producing was no longer coming out of the stack, and we said we got this problem solved. About 3 weeks later, the plant came down for some routine maintenance, and we said, hey, let's get in and check that water injection system that we put in. We stuck our head in the duct, and this is what we found. That is a 12-foot high mountain of concrete that we created.
Guess who had to clean it up?
We had to get in there. It took several weeks. We sent folks in with jackhammers and pickaxes, and we were chipping that stuff up and pulling out. We weren't. He was. he led a crew of folks that went in there to do that. But you know, when this happened to me, I was 5 years with AEP. I thought, my career's done. I better get back to Columbus and just pack my bags, and they're not going to let me keep doing innovative engineering because of this. Fast forward about 3 years later, and I was asked to be the lead engineer for all the air pollution control equipment that we were installing on a brand new power plant down in Arkansas that went into commercial operation in 2012. And I'm proud to say that it is the most efficient and cleanest coal plant in the country operating today. So yeah, you can clap.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll take that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, in essence, I redeemed myself a little bit. And a few years after that, I was asked by AEP to lead a team of engineers alongside the U.S. Department of Energy to design a commercial scale carbon capture and storage system for a power plant. Now, ultimately, this is an artist's rendering. This did not get built because the price tag went way up, and our regulatory commissions in the states where this power plant operates would not give us regulatory approval to complete the project. So this one didn't get built, but it was yet another opportunity that AEP gave me to be innovative. So after this, a few more years passed, and I was asked to be the director of technology development for AEP's power generation organization. And I've been doing that for about the last 6 years. Yet another great opportunity. And then last year, lo and behold, I was asked to become the generation portfolio lead for the building we're standing in right now for its charge organization. So my role in charge is to communicate back to the generation organization, get their ideas, find out where their pain points are, where they need technology, where they need digital solutions, and bring those into the charge organization to turn them into real products. So people often ask me, you've been with the same company for 21 years. How do you do that? And the answer is they keep challenging me. They keep asking me to do new and different things and giving me those opportunities to move forward. So it's been very rewarding for me. But I can't forget where I came from. I can't forget that day I put a mountain of concrete in Tony's power plant. He had to go in there and clean it up. So it's important to always, take the skills you gain along the way, bring them with you, because whether it's good or bad, you learn from it, and it can be, it can turn into the next opportunity for you. It's all about leveraging your past. I'm going to talk a little bit about AEP just to give folks in the room who may not know about us some background. This is our logo, which you've probably seen. The Boundless Energy tagline is fairly new. We just brought that in about a couple of years ago, and it's really part of this cultural transformation that we're going to tell you about because we've got to get a mindset across our employee base that we've got to start thinking beyond our traditional business. We've had an incredible 106-year run, but it could end tomorrow, and we've got to be cognizant of that. We've got to constantly be looking beyond our boundaries to get out of our comfort zone. So this is a snapshot of AEP. We operate in 11 states. We serve roughly 5.5 million customers. I think we're the third largest utility in the United States, so not small by any means. We can, at any given moment, we have the capability to generate 26 gigawatts of electricity. So to put that in perspective, we could send Marty McFly back to the future 21 times at any given moment. So 1.21 gigawatts, that's what it took to send him back to the future. So do a little math, and that's what you get. So no, we're a company of 18,000 plus employees, so not small by any stretch. So when we take on an endeavor like Charge and we try to get innovation into the minds of our employees, we realize it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But if we leverage our history and we keep folks mindful that we've been on top for a lot of years, we can continue to sustain that. So thank you, Tony.
Yeah.
This is a book that many of you might have saw if you hung out in the lobby up there. It's called A Century of Firsts, and it's really our first 100 years and everything that AEP did for the industry ahead of all the other utilities. And it's pretty cool to see a lot of the innovations. But I think you'll see a theme to some of the innovations I'm going to talk about. First, we were the first utility to transmit energy across 765,000 kV lines. And to this day, we did that in 1969. To this day, we're still the only utility in the country that operates 765,000 volt transmission lines. So if you happen to be driving on the interstate, you see these big lines going over, and they've got this 6-line composite there. That's our line. You'll know that. You look up, that's an AEP line. I mentioned our carbon capture project. That actually started in 2007. I didn't get on the project till later in 2009, but we piloted the world's first carbon capture and storage project on a functioning power plant. It was 20 megawatts. It was down at our Mountaineer plant in West Virginia, which isn't too far from the Gavin plant where Tony worked. And then this is the project I worked on, where in 2012, we developed the first ultra supercritical steam power cycle for the United States. There's several of these operating around the world, but we were the first in the United States to do this technology. And as I said, it's the most efficient and cleanest coal plant in operation. And then the most recent, in 2015, our transmission engineers, we developed the Bold transmission tower. And it's a new tower design. It minimizes the losses that occur when you're transmitting energy across transmission lines. But at the same time, it's also a more aesthetically pleasing line or pole to put out, to transmit the energy. So it's another area where we looked at, what would be more pleasing to the customer, listening to the customer. So those are just some of the innovations that we've done over our 100-year history. But as you can see, they're all big, heavy, engineering-related equipment. And the world is changing. And, a realization that we've come to is the barriers to entry in just about any industry or business right now are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to wake up tomorrow and hear that Amazon is getting in the energy business or Google is getting in the energy business. What would we do? Well, what we're doing is transforming our culture to be ready for that, to be ready for those external or internal disruptions. And we just heard earlier this week that Apple is starting its own bank. If you listen to their keynote, they're starting a credit card, and I bet the folks at Chase are scrambling to figure out, just what might happen with the Apple Bank. And so we're trying to get that mindset through the employees and workers at AEP as well. Tony's going to talk to you a little bit about that because it's really about disruption.
Yeah. So I don't need that. I need that.
Sorry.
Thank you. That's all right. So kind of teeing it off, disruption, and what does that mean? This is where I think really think about it from an AEP perspective. It's important to us to understand what disruption means. But this is what I think you guys could take away too, is you always have to be thinking about, if I'm an entrepreneur, what am I worried about and how can I be disrupted in the things that I'm trying to do? Or like I said earlier, if I'm a big company or I work for a big company, what are the things that you can think about as potential disruptive forces? And there's a couple components to disruption, and we're going to talk about those now. So who stayed at a Hilton? Who raised your hand? Who's utilized Airbnb? I think I just saw more Airbnb than I saw Hilton. right? So market cap for Hilton, 100-year-old company, 21 billion. Airbnb, $40 billion market cap, 11 years old. So who has an idea what the major difference is between those two companies? Anybody?
No real estate.
What'd you say, Derek?
No real estate.
Airbnb doesn't have any assets. Hilton owns all the property that they manage and they maintain and offer to you as a customer as a hotel. Airbnb relies on you, the crowd, to offer your real estate for people to live in. It's a totally different business model that probably Hilton had no idea was coming. Comcast, traditional cable, Netflix, and any other streaming service, right? Who's cut the cord? Who still has cable? That's amazing. Did anybody raise their hand for cable? Sorry, cut the cord. So another example, $159 billion market cap, founded 50 years ago or whatever. $142 billion market cap, founded in 1997. But again,
Yeah, Apple, they just announced with their keynote this week, they're getting into the streaming business. So the disruptor becomes the disrupted. What's Netflix going to do when Apple starts their own?
so we've got to be thinking about this stuff all the time. Here's another example, a yellow cab, 100-year-old company. Who uses a cab? Anybody? I mean, a couple people? Uber, Lyft. Guess what? They don't own assets either. Just like Airbnb. Times are changing, and technology is driving these companies to make decisions and understand different opportunities to leverage technology to disrupt businesses that have been around for a long time. And AEP, and some of you might be part of those companies today. Here's another example. 1900.
What do you see there?
San Francisco.
It's actually New York. But what do you see?
So 1900 is the
1900,
year.
it's the year.
Shout it out. What do you guys see? Horse and carriage.
See anything else?
Open streets.
Who said that? I heard it.
Who said one car?
One car, right here. There's one vehicle
One vehicle.
in that street of horse and buggies. So zooming back out, I mean, it's not obvious, but there's a ton of people there. 12 years later, same block.
Same intersection, same street.
What is it obvious? But anybody? But what do you see? Yep. Who saw it? Who sees it? Yeah, you see that right there? Right here. One horse and buggy still remains. That horse and buggy whip manufacturer probably had no idea the automotive industry was going to put them out of business in 12 years. It's been happening forever. We need to make sure that we, all of us in this room, that we are accounting for this and the things that we do. That's external disruption. This is internal disruption. Central Power and Light Company. We, AEP, own Central Power Light. We manufactured and delivered ice. And until electrification was spread throughout using our product and people had electrification in their homes to refrigerate, this was a service we offered. We disrupted ourselves by electrifying the homes that you guys live in. And this business obviously no longer exists. So it happens to all of us. It happens to us internally. It happens to us externally. But we're trying to make sure that things like this, in what you're sitting in today, are putting us in a position to combat these external forces and sometimes internal forces, which are good and sometimes bad. But that's part of the journey.
Yeah, so I mean, what we're trying to do through the reinvention of our innovative, DNA that we've had for years, is just get people to be more cognizant of these external and internal disruptors, and not so much look at them as threats, but look at them as opportunities. So it's about doing things differently. Across a company of 18,000 employees, I can't tell you how many times I run into people that say, well, we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way. So why change? But we've got to get the mindset through individuals throughout our organization that change is good. And we need to change so that we can stay out in front. And it's about creating the future. It's about getting outside your comfort zone, getting outside the box and thinking about, it's that boundless energy tagline on our logo, right? It's not how AEP functions today, but what other businesses can we get into in the future to give ourselves opportunities to either disrupt ourselves or disrupt other industries. And then it's about rethinking failure. Folks shouldn't go home like I did back in 2003 thinking, you know what, I wasn't successful, I might lose my job. No, we want to rethink how we look at failure. We want to fail fast. We want to fail forward. We want to turn those failures into learning opportunities so that next time we do better. Another thing that we're doing is just creating a more collaborative environment. We're doing so many things across our company to pull people out of the silos we work in today, get people collaborating. We're doing meetup events like this, but we're bringing folks from across the AEP organization, from HR, from IT, from engineering. We're introducing technology to them, and then we're saying, give us your ideas to tell us how these technologies can help you. And Tony's going to show you a few of the technologies that actually came from those meetup events where we turned them into real solutions and products. And then we're taking a community approach. One thing we've just launched in the last 3 weeks within AEP is what we call Illumination Lab. And it's a technology accelerator where we're inviting startups from around the country and around the world to join AEP, to come to Columbus and join us and work on problems. But the problems that we're working on are coming from our employees, coming from within the company. And we're taking those ideas and we're listening to those ideas and we're trying to understand the ones that will bring the most value. And it's really about that bringing folks together, collaborating, and listening that is going to get us to the next level.
And although we're not necessarily collaborating here, this is what you all are here to do, is to learn from experience. And it helps us in our daily lives in the way that we recognize we need to. And we love that you're here and we want to collaborate with more folks like you and engage in some things like the Illumination Lab as an example.
Yeah, I mean, the more we can get ourselves out in the community to learn what others are doing and how it's working, the better we're going to be. And we hope that we can impart some of the wisdom that we've come up with into what you're doing too. So it's all about that community and fostering that community. I'm going to turn it over to Tony now.
Yeah, so this slide kind of represents what I do now. I didn't really get into it earlier, but I'm in the IT organization now. Mechanical engineer doesn't really make sense to a lot of you probably, why an engineer in the IT organization. But because I had the skill set and knowledge from the engineering organization that I accumulated over the years after I started with AEP, understanding the business and listening to your customers to know what their expectations are was part of the reason why I'm in this position now, is to understand the business and understand what they need to be able to provide technology solutions working with them, for them. So this is a visual that kind of represents what we do. And this is really what I think you guys can take away and apply to your lives if you think about it. There's core services that you do. You all get up in the morning and do your daily work. You try to keep up. You've got a list that you go into work with. Try to check the boxes and get stuff done. Do you ever really have a lot of time to think about what I want to do next week, next month, next year? That's really what we're trying to do with the businesses that we interact with, and it happens to be the Generation organization. From an IT technology perspective, what do you want to do over the next year, 3 years, 5 years? And if you imagine, all of this stuff takes up a ton of time. By the end of the day, we're done. We can't do anymore. We can't think about how to do things differently. And we didn't get a lot of time to spend doing this innovation, thinking about how can we do things differently. Some of the stuff we do down here is super wasteful. Is there a different way to do it? We never have a chance to talk about it. So from an IT perspective, we spend a lot of time just keeping up. And I think you all can relate. We're just trying to keep up. But what we've recognized, and you'll hear about in the next couple slides, is that this charge organization and the opportunity that we have to collaborate is our response to that.
Yeah, from the business unit perspective, we were in the same boat, right? I mean, it's a power generation organization. So our main goal in our charge and our core competency is keeping the lights on. Making sure that the power generated at the plants is reliable and that the plants are running when they're supposed to. So we spend a lot of time in that core services area, Obviously, we're looking at strategy. We're thinking about, okay, what's our generating fleet going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What are environmental regulations going to be forcing us to do? But at the end of the day, we're putting the majority of our time, energy, and resources into those lower areas of the triangle. And we were being challenged to innovate, but we just weren't having the time to do it.
So we were both, in creating this presentation, we both kind of had the epiphany that we were doing a lot of the same things, but in this segregated way, in these silos that you hear big companies talking about. We're doing things in silos. We recognize that obviously we're doing innovation in silos, but there's a lot of good that's happened, and I'm going to show you a couple things that from some of these innovation blitzes and collaboration opportunities that we've had, we've made a lot of progress. So again, it's kind of a recognition of what you've accomplished and not throwing that away, but trying to figure out how you've accomplished that and making it better. So some of these things are, this is augmented reality. Who's played with augmented reality? A couple people. So this is integrating systems using augmented reality. You know, say I'm an engineer, as I am, and I go out to the power plant where this picture's taken from. I can use my mobile device, point it at a piece of equipment, and in real time, this window will pop up with real-time operation characteristics. So as an engineer, that's a powerful tool, because then I don't have to go back to my computer in my office and look at the same information. Really cool stuff. The bold tower that Matt talked about, that's actually not a real tower. That's an augmented reality tower that we're using as marketing material to potential customers that want to see that in their site for potential use. Another example of how we're using technology to grow our business capability and work with our customers. Everybody's got apps. Everybody's got a phone with apps on it. This is an app that we've offered to our internal employees to help them do their job safer, to understand the interactions that they have with equipment. This is an example of that. We also partner with a community. This is like our, I'm going to say a name, and if anybody recognizes this name, he's like out there in the community everywhere. Chris Rousel. Anybody know that name? He is big into augmented and virtual reality, and we partnered with the zoo to create a augmented reality experience last year when baby giraffe were being born. If anybody remembers that. We partnered with them, so zoo members, if they scanned their membership card, they would see little tabletop giraffe walking around on the table. It was really cool. It was a good opportunity to partner with a company here locally, as well as grow that capability for our own use. We've got a voice channel, so those of you that might be in Indiana, Michigan Power, anybody? No, just kidding. You can interact with an Alexa device or a Google Home and get information about your service, your bill, how to reduce your consumption. This is an area where operating in these silos, we're still making progress, but it's not as efficient as it could be. And lastly, as a big energy utility with millions of customers that Matt pointed out, we get a lot of data, and this slide is meant to be messy. There's data everywhere, and data analytics can help us learn about the customers. And this is an example of what we're trying to do, as probably not as efficient as we can do today, but we look and strive to be better going forward. So as you can see, you know, we were both doing it. This is an example of all the business units that are probably doing the same thing. They've got their own pillars of innovation, and this is really where listening to the customer, but also collaborating. You need to reach out and collaborate with the different areas of your organization to learn what they're doing. Connect in communities like this and understand some of the challenges that people are facing, some of the failures that they've had, and really try to bridge that gap. And that was what we recognized. There's a gap that we need to bridge. So there's this big void in here, and Matt's going to talk about now what we're doing with Charge to try to bridge that gap, and it's something I think you guys can think about maybe promoting to your leader or promoting to your organization on how to change the way you're doing work.
Yeah, so as Tony said, innovation was occurring. It was occurring in pockets in the business unit. We were working with IT to help us on the digital side to get some of these technologies up and running. But our leadership, even up to our executive leadership, they saw the benefits of that, but then they saw, you know, we've got this big gap. And why? It's because we're innovating in folks' spare time. So let's make innovation somebody's full-time job. And that's what Charge is. And there's a reason that the gradient is flipped, because Charge can spend all its time, energy, and resources up in that bright red area on innovation. And at the end of the day, this is what it ends up looking like. We don't want to stifle the innovation that's occurring in the business units or in Tony's organization, IT, we want to augment it. We want to take it to the next level because Charge can focus on that full time. And then what we'll see is that innovation making its way into the core and into the future strategy of those organizations. And we really think that's what's going to make us successful. So how are we going to measure that success? It's a big question we're getting as we're going out into the business units and proclaiming what we're going to be doing in Charge. So how do you know you're going to be making a difference? Well, we've got some desired outcomes that we really want to go for. We want to expand our capabilities. We want to give ourselves more capabilities in different technology areas to grow our business. We want to enable technology to help us in ways it's never helped us before. We still, sad story, but you go out to our power plants and we've still got technicians walking around the plant floor with clipboards and pieces of paper, taking data on doing checklists, taking data, and then they're going back to their desk and they're setting their clipboard down, and maybe when they get time, they're going in and they're putting that data in an Excel spreadsheet, trying to build a chart with it or something. It's that bad. We want to give them the tools that allow them to get the data in real time, and produce results, give themselves dashboards where they can look at equipment health and be smarter about how they're making decisions and how they're spending the money out in the organization. So we want to enable that to happen. And then we want to empower our employees to bring us your ideas. We don't want to pretend to know everything in Charge. We want your ideas. We want you to tell us where your pain points are, and then we'll figure out a way to give you a digital tool or a solution that can help. And how are we going to measure our success? We've got some key performance indicators that our executive leadership teams pass down to us. It's really about intensifying value. We want to look for that return on investment. So we're looking for high value solutions that either reduce cost, improve operational efficiency, or avoid some of the costs that we're spending today. We want to increase velocity. As Tony said, we were doing a lot of good work. We were making some things happen, but we want to do this at a more rapid pace. We want to get solutions in our employees' hands, in our customers' hands, faster, so that they're more satisfied. And it goes right in the next one, exceeding expectations. That's customer expectations, right? We want to be, the iPhone for our customers. I mean, how many folks look at their phone every day and say, how did I get through the day before without having this phone in my pocket? Access to information, the ability to do anything instantaneously. That's what we want. We want that customer and that user experience to be as high as it is with the iPhone. So we're really looking to satisfy the customers, and we're putting metrics in place that will allow us to look at how many times our apps are being used over and over again and give us that feedback. And then we just want to create the future. We want IP and other things to come out of this organization that we can either transfer to the industry or even outside our industry. And we want to build that. We want to build it here at Charge. So I hope through the presentation, going back to our takeaways, that you kind of get an understanding for how we really want to leverage the past and not lose sight of where AEP has been, but understanding that we have to change. We've got to live that transformative culture and keep communicating it to make sure that it's getting heard. At the same time, we need to listen. We need to listen to what our customers are telling us. We need to listen to what our employees are telling us so that we make sure we're doing the right things and doing things that add that value that we're looking for. And then finally, we want to work with folks like you to grow our community. We want to share our experiences. We want to hear from your experiences so that we make sure that Charge is sustainable moving forward. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Come on back up, Derek.
Oh, go back. There we go.
Since I don't have a mic, I'm just going to talk really loudly, which is a dream come true for me. So tonight is just the beginning, like you said, of a conversation, not only between. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Not only between them and us, but also of all of us. So again, we're starting a Q&A. Later, we'll carry it on later at 16-bit to carry on the conversation. But this is the beginning of a dialogue. One question that I have to start off with is, what was the inciting event? Like, there must have been something that really lit like AEP's butt to create Charge. So what was it? Like
Right.
you just don't have like lots of money laying around. You're like, we should make a beautiful space to do cool stuff. Like there has to be some really inciting event that made you think we have to do this now.
We get the mic. Yeah, thanks. Derek, you want to?
So this would be a journey into the mind of our CEO, Nick Akins. He's a pretty progressive guy. He's one of the few CEOs I know that is always looking for what's next, and he really means it. As you can see by this facility, he really means it. I think a lot of people kind of fake the notion of we're going to do something innovative or we're going to create an innovation team. He thoroughly meant it. And I think that the moment, without really knowing exactly where he was or what he was thinking, was what I've been told by him when I came through this process to join AEP was they were tired of reading about innovation. Right? You can open up any trade rag or any LinkedIn page or CNBC. They're tired of reading about it, and they wanted to kind of figure out we've got all this talent sitting across 18,000 person wide organizations. Surely we can figure this stuff out ourselves. We don't need to always buy it off the market or get it from other services. Surely we can create some of these things for ourselves. And they started looking themselves in the mirror and asking the questions, well, why aren't we? What's stopping us from authoring more about this technology and stop reading only about it? And they realized it was us. We were in our own way. We had a lot of processes. Look, we're running a utility. This is a life safety business, whether we realize that or not. Electricity doesn't work. We don't get food or water. That's just how the world works now. So we can't forsake our core operations. We can't risk what we do each and every day to provide electrical services. So how do we do something and still be innovative without risking anything at the core of our business? Create a separate organization. Not much different than like Skunkworks was for Lockheed Martin. Kind of that same type of model. And a lot of companies have done this. So we were able to look at kind of what they did and how they did it and take the best practices, like the best of everything, and take also some of the lessons learned where it hasn't gone well. And lo and behold, just a few months later, Charge was born, and it happened pretty fast. It was conceived of in December of the year before last, so December of 2017. They just thought of the idea. By July, we really started the process, and since July, look where we are. So it was a real idea that found grounded kind of thinking by our CEO and just cascaded throughout the entire organization. This organization is going to be about 75 people all in, but we've probably had 7,500 people from AEP come through the facility to see if this thing is really real, and as you can tell, it is.
And Matt mentioned something earlier that is important that I talked about is disruption. I think there's a global concern about the what-if scenarios, and Matt said he wouldn't be surprised tomorrow if we woke up and saw Amazon entering the electricity industry, and that would be a pretty significant disruption to us. So we got to think differently. I mentioned it. We got to think differently, do things differently, and this is kind of the incubation space to make that happen.
So I'm going to ask one more question and then walk around. If any of you guys have questions, please raise your hand to indicate to me after this so I can grab you and you can ask these gentlemen. Another question I have is, like, to put it bluntly, we hear the term innovation a lot. Like in Columbus and technology, like everybody's innovating in some way, shape, or form. I'm wondering, what does innovation particularly, like how does it feel differently for you at AEP now? Like what's something day to day in your process that you feel has fundamentally changed how you work or how you approach your work?
Sure, if you would like.
Well, I mean, a lot of it for me is just, I still have an office over at the headquarters building, but when I set foot in this space, I want to be productive. It makes me want to be more productive. It makes me want to just tackle whatever's in front of me. And so I've kind of had a new, 21 years at AEP, but innovation to me is coming to work every day with kind of a newfound mission of why I'm here. And as I go out into the generation organization now, some of which is back over at headquarters, some of which is out in the field at our plants and stuff, I'm taking the energy that is here within Charge with me, and I'm actually seeing it return back. I'm working on a project right now with a central circuit breaker maintenance shop that we have within our fleet of power generating plants. And I'm working with the technicians and the supervisors in that shop to totally digitalize their process, which is all done on paper and things today. And we got those guys in a room to have a user-centered design session with them. And the enthusiasm that they brought and the energy that they contributed to that workshop to tell us, hey, if I could have something that could do this, and if I had a screen that showed me, this, and this for a particular breaker, it would, make my work so much easier. And we're putting those solutions in place for them, and their engagement has been inspiring for me. So it's not just a buzzword anymore. I'm actually seeing in real life the impacts of what innovation is doing in our company.
I think there's been a history of delayed problem solving. There's been problems out there for years, and there hasn't necessarily been the avenue to get things done as quickly as those users in the fleet and in our organization want to get done. And we're going about problem solving differently. We're bringing these people together in this environment to collaborate, and it might not be, it's a lot different than what it has been in the past, to provide that opportunity for people to talk about the problems and then respond and deliver a solution. And that because of the big behemoth of AEP and the regulated utility, there's process around what we do and who we are. And to Derek's point, this is separate from that. This is a safe space to learn and do things differently. And I think that's one of the biggest things that the proof's in the pudding, and we're starting to implement solutions out of this space.
Yeah, and use sorry, Troy, 1 second. Just to use kind of the standard definition, innovation is the combination of two or more unlike ideas. This place is completely that. Everything that we do, from who we hire, how we hire, their job descriptions, the processes that we use, the technologies that we employ, the ideas that we have, the way we can, all of that is up for questioning here. And I think to pile into Tony's kind of point, that's exactly what an innovation lab has to be for it to actually be an innovation lab. It has to be a consequence-free zone where you're allowed to question everything and expect the ability to create a response to that question. If all you're doing is doing very kind of plots or variations to the basic plot line of your business or your company, it may or may not really be true innovation. But if you're allowed to question everything and live within that question until you find the solution, that's innovation. And that's what we expect here. In fact, I wish one of our colleagues was here. He invented what we call the BAD process, which is the behavioral adaptation design. We had a user-centered design process. He thought we could do a better one because it wasn't quite what we thought it needed to be. So he invented the BAD process, which has bad results and is led by a bad person, and you hope for bad outcomes, right? All that was their kind of approach to saying, there's a better way to do this, and they don't need to do the mother may I. Can I invent a new process for user-centered design? Go do that, because this entire kind of organization depends upon that kind of thinking, and that bad process has led to some really innovative technology on the other side of it.
So we got one question. Couple questions. Thanks.
I might have to throw a wrench into the mix. I come from I'm born and raised Columbus, Ohio, but I was raised in San Francisco. Innovation was about public power. Are you looking at innovation in terms of like public ownership of power?
Ownership of power.
There is a movement underway called Free Electrons that we are actively engaged in. In fact, we're the only North America utility that's actually engaged in that consortium. You can look them up. They're out of Europe. And there is this movement towards the notion that electricity itself, the electrons, are actually not that interesting and probably should be publicly accessible. The generation equipment, right, and although I think you saw the transmission wires, 765 kV, all that stuff, that is an asset, that has value, and that absolutely needs cost recovery on. But the electrons themselves, the power that comes off of it, isn't necessarily part of the business model. Now, that's not where we are today, but there's this growing movement in that direction.
It's not where you are today?
No. No, it's not where any North America utility actually is today.
Well,
There's municipals, but they still charge the same way that we do.
Okay, go ahead. There's a couple more questions are popping up here. Got 3 of them now, 4 of them. All right.
What did I say?
This is a little bit of like a two-parter, but I just wanted to get your opinion on decentralized energy grid, and also what role do you think batteries and battery storage technologies will play in the energy grid of the future?
You've got firsthand experience in that.
Yeah, we are actively engaged in looking at decentralized energy models. The traditional value stream of the electric utility of the past was we generate over here and the customer's over here. And now we're seeing generation pop up all along that value stream, even at the customer. So it's a challenge for us in one respect that we're trying to balance all of that. As the grid owner and operator, we're trying to balance all of that decentralized energy. But again, it opens up opportunities for us to get more involved in it. And energy storage is going to be a game changer, right? Right now, it's relatively small scale, kind of expensive, especially in our service territory. But once technology gets to the point where there are bulk energy storage technologies that are out there that can do hundreds of megawatts, it's really going to change the game. So we've got teams of engineers over at AEP headquarters that are actively looking at energy storage and how we can use it. We're doing some pilots here and there to figure out how we can best use it today. While the economics may not be there, but to get ourselves familiarized with the technology, get our engineers up to speed on it. So
I think another point to make is that illumination lab effort will hear how energy storage can be coupled with primary energy technologies to provide that distributed energy capability. And there are half a dozen or so ideas that are going to be probably presented as part of that effort to do exactly what you described, as well as to mature that capability and technology to make it more prevalent and relevant. Sorry.
Yeah, but that's the grid of the future, and we're not taking a blind eye to that. We're going to be out in front.
Cool. I see a few more hands. We have time for about 2 more, if that's okay. Like I said, it's the beginning of the conversation, so if we don't get to you, you can grab any of them afterwards.
My name is AC. I'm with AWH, a software creation or product creation and software engineering firm. My question for you guys is, because we talk to a lot of enterprise clients that are doing the same thing, like the innovation, how are you able to kind of cross the paths to other organizations within the organization to get everyone on the same page?
It's a challenge. We're 18,000 customer company or employee company, and that is hard, but it takes time. And
there's kind of preoccupation with channel contention, right? You got multiple factions, and how do you get them all to participate? Especially what we do here is meant to be edge tech at its onset. But ultimately, if we develop an innovative piece of technology, it's meant to go back into the core. So how do you get agreement amongst all these different groups? And how do you decide, well, who gets to innovate and who doesn't? My answer to this is a little unconventional. Everybody should be innovating all the damn time. Nobody owns anything. Nobody has cornered this market. We just approach it with a different methodology. If other departments are able to innovate and attack the same problems that we are, that's fantastic. Let's compare notes and do a bake-off and figure out what we learn from one another, and then even participate. So we're extremely transparent about the work that goes on within Charge. Even though we're separate as a facility, we make sure everything is virtually accessible. So we have dashboards and everything that's going on. In fact, if you look back there, we have our Kanban board. That Kanban board is actually digitized and actually accessible by anybody in the company that wants to see it. And we want to invite their participation. We also try to bring people in early to what it is that we're doing, especially those that will be owning organizations. It's essential to not only be transparent, but inclusive. So one thing I've always made mention of whenever I present out to the other departments across AEB is we do not have exclusivity on innovation or even the technology stacks that we're on. We are learning this tech as everyone else is learning this tech. So if you ever heard of that phrase, I'm competing with you, I'm not competing with you, right? We're in this together. That's an essential part of any innovation lab, to make sure it is a part of the organization, not apart from the organization.
And I can't emphasize enough that Matt is aligned with Charge, and I am aligned with IT. And the fact that we're sitting next to each other is exactly that. Like, what happens here, if it becomes part of the core, comes back to me and the traditional IT organization that we all are aware of and know of. And it's part of our core service. Not all the time. We just talked about that earlier. It might not all the time come back to the traditional IT service, but that's a differentiator, I think, that makes this work maybe a little bit different than what we're typically familiar with.
Cool. All right, we have time for one last question.
Thank you for this presentation. It's been fantastic.
Thanks.
One question I had was, I'm a really big techie and I'm into all types of emerging technologies. I think one of the ones that's not talked about nearly enough is self-driving cars. I feel like that one is above everything, between that, 3D printing, MR, AR. I think that one is actually going to have the biggest impact. And it's kind of interesting that you showed the horses and how 12 years later. So what I wanted to know is what your thoughts were on autonomous vehicles and the impact that they're going to have on our society, and what kind of ideas you have towards what Charge is going to do, especially when it comes to energy usage. That's going to be a really, really big game changer.
It's interesting you asked that question. First and foremost, just to give you a straight answer, we think autonomous vehicles are going to have impact. And we recently, we're in the midst of a crowdsourcing activity right now within AEP, where we've asked folks for ideas. We call it Spark Tank, similar to Shark Tank, where we want your ideas, and then if your ideas make it through some levels of screening, you get to come pitch for an executive committee. You get to pitch your idea. And this year, we're taking Spark Tank to the next level, and we're partnering our idea developers within the organization with a startup through our Illumination Lab. And one of the ideas that has made its way to the finals is around autonomous vehicles in and around our power plants. The coal-fired power plants that we showed you some pictures of up there, a lot of them operate landfills adjacent to the plant site. So we're taking a lot of the materials that are captured from the plant and putting them into landfills that are on nearby property that we own. And we're looking at autonomous vehicle technology to do all that hauling today, so that we can put the folks that are typically doing that hauling or managing it in higher value roles and take advantage of that technology to do those jobs. So that's one that I think we're gonna see some activity around, and I'm excited to see where we go with that.
Smart City?
Yeah, and Smart City as well. AEP was part of the whole Smart City endeavor here in Columbus, and we know that there's aspects of that involve autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles, and we've been heavily engaged in that. So
A lot of that is the continuation of electrification, like we saw earlier, and how AEP disrupted their own business. There's the infrastructure that we need to have in place to electrify and move towards electronic or battery EV vehicles, but also that kind of plays into how autonomous vehicles can then be used as well.
And you mentioned your technology, so I'll tell you the precursor to full autonomy of any vehicle kind of fleets across the country and the world is going to be 5G. If you're a technological enthusiast, that's a big damn deal, because one of the things that slows our strategies down in terms of employment of technology is the lack of ubiquitous bandwidth. Once 5G starts to permeate right at the ultra-high frequencies, it's going to make accessibility of everything from IoT sensors to mobile devices and everything else. It opens up the door for us to put even more technology in places that were never imagined to be before. If you think about our service territory, we're in beautiful Columbus, right, a metropolitan, but a lot of our service territory is not. You start getting 5G out there, you're going to start seeing accessibility of more of the tech that we're developing. So we're all for it. So when you see autonomous vehicles coming into play, you're seeing AT&T, Verizon, trying to run to the markets and the towers and adding 5G everywhere.
Can I say one thing before you close this out? Because I got lost in my nervousness at the beginning, and I didn't say thanks to the appropriate people. Derek at Charge, Matt and Martha. Is Martha still around? So Martha managed all the catering and the drinks and the facilitation of you all being here. Can we give her And then the other sponsors. So thank you very much. But most importantly is the Columbus Web Group. These three guys helped us out more than you'll ever know. And Kevin said 3 months, and it was probably about 3 months that we were meeting on Saturdays. We were meeting on weekday evenings to really try to hone this, to make this applicable to you guys, and I hope that it was. But please join with me in thanking these guys, because they're doing it in their spare time, and they don't have a lot of it, and it is really impressive of what they're trying to do for our community, and I think it's awesome. So again, thank you for that very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to this March Columbus Web Group. Like we said, we're going to be continuing here on Afterwards Socializing. If that's not your bag, hopefully we see you next month when Jay Klaus presents to us on Beyond Networking. If you're sitting on a chair, congratulations, they're free. You get to take them with you. Just kidding, don't take your chairs. But thank you guys so much. Please make sure if you have any refuse, throw it in its appropriate spot, and we'll see you next month.